Hello there, you're watching All 24 News World News program. Coming up next on tonight's top stories. Gaza massacres escalate, dozens killed in Sabra, Khan Yunis, Jabalia and Rafah. Resistance vows more strikes and warns occupation against forced prisoner retrieval. Coming up as well, Gaza on the brink, fuel to run out in 3 days, hospitals shut in the north, and the UN warns of famine as Medellin ship nears the coast. Also in our news, in Libya, unity government probes Sabrata clashes and the UN welcomes steps to prevent new conflict. And in Ukraine war, it heats up. Deadly strikes rock both sides for third day. Russia hits Kharkiv, blames Kiev for delayed prisoner swap. Ukraine pushes back. This story and more shortly. Welcome back to the program. First off in our news, dozens are dead or wounded after a Zionist airstrike hit a home sheltering displaced Palestinians in Gaza City on Saturday. The Palestinian Civil Defense in Gaza reports at least 15 people were killed, including 6 children and at least 50 others injured. The strike targeted the Abu Sharia family home in Gaza City's Sabra neighborhood.
This is the cruelty of Israel. This is what it looks like, killing children and destruction. Innocent people are being killed. What can I say? The man and his wife who are elderly were murdered. It's crazy. They did nothing. This is purely unjust. We ask the whole world, the European countries and others to help us to end this war.
Meanwhile, Civil Defense spokesman Mahmoud Basal has warned the death toll is expected to rise significantly with upwards of 30 feared killed. He stated 85 people are believed trapped under the rubble of the destroyed building. Basal described the strike on the home in the Sabra neighborhood as a massacre, saying everyone inside was killed. Rescue efforts continue, but he added crews lack the heavy equipment needed to quickly reach those buried.
The Israeli occupation clearly targeted a residential building in a Sabra neighborhood. The house belongs to Abu Sharia family and was full of residents. Many martyrs lie buried under the rubble. The Israeli occupation forces deployed a significant force of destruction to target this building. Indeed, a large number of people are now under the rubble. Teams are trying to clear what they can, but the situation is very difficult and requires heavy equipment and tools.
Additionally, deadly strikes across Gaza have left scores dead. Medical sources say 22 Palestinians were killed when occupation forces hit tents sheltering the displaced west of Khan Yunis. In nearby El Mawasi, at least 14 were killed in a similar strike. Further north, 25 deaths were reported in Zionist bombardments on Jabalia. Gaza City and central areas also saw casualties, with drone strikes and shelling killing dozens more, including children and aid seekers, as violence intensifies across the entire strip. For its part, the government media office in Gaza says at least 110 people have been killed and over 580 injured in Zionist strikes targeting aid seekers in Rafah since May 27th. In a statement on Saturday, officials accused the occupation of turning suspicious aid centers into mass death traps, luring desperate civilians with food before bombing the crowds, a move they call a clear violation of international humanitarian law. As for the resistance, Hamas armed group or the armed wing, Al-Qassam Brigades, has issued a warning to the occupation, saying its military losses in Khan Yunis and Jabalia are just a sample of what awaits. In a Telegram post, spokesman Abu Ubaidah urged Israeli settlers to pressure their leaders to stop the war of extermination. He also warned that any attempt to rescue an occupation prisoner by force could lead to his death. Hamas released a photo of the captive Matan Zangulker appearing to receive treatment, saying he'll only be freed through a negotiated deal.
وإذا تعلق الأمر بالرد على عدوانكم
An urgent warning to whom it may concern. The occupation forces are besieging a location where the Zionist captive Metan Tsankwaka is being held. We affirm unequivocally that the enemy will not be able to retrieve him alive. If this captive is killed during a rescue attempt, the occupation army will bear full responsibility for his death, especially after we have preserved his life for a year and 8 months. Let it be known, we have given clear warning.
In another development, the Palestinian Ministry of Health, this time in Gaza, is warning of a total collapse of the health system in the southern Gaza Strip. This comes after occupation forces targeted the Nasser Medical Complex in Khan Yunis, the last major hospital still functioning in the area. The ministry says shutting it down would trigger a full-blown humanitarian disaster. It's now urging international actors to intervene, protect medical facilities, and ensure the delivery of life-saving supplies. In the same context, the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza is sounding the alarm over the collapse of the healthcare system in the southern Gaza Strip. It says the occupation strike on Nasser Medical Complex in Khan Yunis, only functioning hospital in the area, risks triggering a humanitarian catastrophe. In a separate statement, the ministry added that access to Al Amal Hospital, run by the Red Crescent, is now impossible due to the Israeli siege. Dozens of patients and medical staff are trapped inside after residents were forced to evacuate the area. The ministry is calling for urgent international intervention meanwhile. Similarly, the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza has warned that fuel supplies in hospitals could run out within just 72 hours. In a statement, the ministry said occupation forces are blocking access to fuel storage sites, saying they are located in red zones. It's urging immediate international action to prevent a total shutdown of medical services. In reaction, the World Health Organization says every hospital in northern Gaza has now stopped functioning, warning of a total collapse of the territory's health system. The Nasser Medical Complex and Al Amal hospitals, two of the last major facilities still operating, are at risk of shutting down. The UN agency is urging immediate protection for both hospitals and calling for the safe and impeded entry of vital medicine and supplies. Without action, it warns the consequences for patients and the wounded will be catastrophic.
The healthcare system in Gaza is collapsing. Nasser Medical Complex and Al Amal Hospital are at risk of shutting down, and without them, people will lose access to essential health services. The closure of these two hospitals would have devastating consequences for patients in need for surgical care, intensive care, blood banks and transfusions, cancer treatment and dialysis. The continuous and systematic destruction of hospitals in Gaza has gone on for far too long. This destruction must stop immediately.
For its part, the United Nations Children's Fund is sounding the alarm, saying Gaza is on the brink of famine. In a statement on Saturday, UNICEF warned that children are now entering a deadly nutritional phase. The agency says the crisis is the worst it has ever seen for women and children in the Strip. With aid blocked and food supplies dwindling, UNICEF is urging immediate humanitarian access to prevent a looming catastrophe. In another story, the Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor has accused the occupation of arming criminal gangs to steal aid in Gaza, calling it a deliberate tactic to impose famine through proxy militants. In a statement on Friday, the group said this chaos is being engineered to deepen the collapse of Palestinian life, not targeting Hamas, but aiming to systematically exterminate Palestinians.
Israel is imposing famine on the Palestinians in Gaza through criminal gangs. These gangs have looted aid trucks, obstructed their distribution, and opened fire on civilians. Israel does not stop at starving Gaza, but deliberately creates chaos to deepen the collapse of civil life. This is not a strategy to combat Hamas, but a systematic plan to destroy the civilian survival system.
The international community to break the siege announced on Friday that the ship Madeline, which set sail from Italy toward Gaza, is now off Egypt's Marsa Matruh coast. The committee says the vessel is steadily making its way to Gaza and is expected to arrive within 48 hours. They describe the next hours as critical, calling on popular and international solidarity to pressure the Zionist occupation, which has threatened to block the ship from approaching or docking along the Gaza coast. And as this vessel is trying to distribute aid to Gazans, the lucky ones have received some share, but for many others, only crumbs remain. Aid supplies simply aren't enough to feed Gaza's 2 million hungry residents. Desperate families are trying to fill their stomachs with whatever they can find as the humanitarian crisis deepens there. More details with Zahra Farjani now.
In Gaza's Al-Mawasi refugee camp, the scent of Eid al-Adha this year isn't grilled lamb or festive spices. It's thin lentil soup and boiled rice. For 36-year-old Tahrir Abu Jazzar and her 5 children, this humble meal is all they have. And yet, it feels like a feast amid famine. These besieged Gazans can't even dare collect any aid because this comes with the risk of death.
I went out to fight food for my children, but it was all false promises. We saw people being shot. They opened fire on us, and we came back with nothing. This is our life now. No Eid, no celebrations, no new clothes, no gifts, not even a trace of joy. Eid used to be different. We would have meat, liver, and the kids were so excited for the holiday spirit.
This is the second Eid al-Adha under the weight of a relentless war. For many Gazans, there are no family gatherings, no prayers and no celebrations, only the ache of what's been lost and the terror of what could come next. Despite the hunger and heartbreak, Tahrir managed to bring a brief smile on her children's faces, a small victory in a world turned upside down.
Today there is no Eid, no celebration, no clothes, no meat, no presents, no happiness. The spirit of the holiday is gone. My children wanted to go to Eid prayers, but fear kept them home. The bombings were too intense.
Massacred, displaced, starved, stripped of everything. This is the reality of the war on Gaza that has dragged on for nearly 2 years. A brutal reality that becomes even more devastating as the world marks Eid with family and celebration.
Meanwhile, massive demonstrations erupted across several European cities on Saturday as thousands took to the streets to protest the ongoing Zionist war of extermination in Gaza. In capitals like Stockholm and Berlin, and cities such as Aarhus, protesters demanded an immediate ceasefire, an end to the siege, and unrestricted humanitarian aid access. The crowds carried banners calling for full accountability over Zionist war crimes against civilians. Elsewhere in the Middle East, in Lebanon to be precise, the Health Ministry's Emergency Operations Center reported 2 people injured when a Zionist military drone dropped a sound bomb near a gathering in the town of Hula. The Lebanese National News Agency confirmed multiple violations of southern airspace by occupation drones, which dropped sound bombs between Hula and Merkaba in the Marjiyun district of Nabatea, near the border with occupied Palestine. To other regional news now. In Libya, the government of national unity has ordered an immediate and thorough investigation into clashes that erupted on Friday in the city of Sabratha. The GNA Prime Minister Abdulhamid Dbeibeh stressed that no group will be allowed to destabilize any Libyan city and vowed that the law will be enforced on all parties, without exception, that is. The investigation is now underway under the command of the Western Coast Military Region. On a related note, the United Nations Support Mission in Libya welcomed the formation of 2 committees by Libya's Presidential Council created to tackle security and human rights issues. In a Saturday statement, the United Nations Support Mission in Libya said the move aims to prevent fighting, protect civilians, and address concerns about detention centers. The UN mission pledged ongoing support to or for the committees, aligning efforts with international standards amid growing calls from Libyans for meaningful reforms.
The United Nations Support Mission in Libya welcomes the Presidential Council's formation of two committees composed of key parties to address security and human rights concerns. These efforts aim to strengthen security arrangements to prevent the outbreak of fighting, ensure the protection of civilians, and address human rights issues in detention centers, including the widespread practice of arbitrary detention.
Moving on to other topical development in Eastern Europe now, Russia launched a heavy barrage of missiles and drones across multiple Ukrainian regions early on Saturday, killing at least 5 people. The Ukrainian Air Force reported repelling 206 drones and 9 missiles overnight, with attacks focused on Kharkiv, the country's second largest city, and the southern city of Kherson. Kharkiv's mayor called the strike unprecedented since the war began, highlighting the ongoing intensity of the conflict. Still with the war in Ukraine, Russia announced Saturday that it targeted Ukrainian military positions and foreign mercenary sites, destroying production workshops and drone warehouses. The Russian military claimed Ukrainian forces inflicted heavy losses in Kharkiv, framing their strikes as retaliation for Kiev's attacks on Russian targets. The escalating exchanges underline the deepening conflict across the region. And finally, in this file, Russia accused Ukraine Saturday of indefinitely postponing a prisoner exchange and the return of soldiers' bodies, agreements reached earlier this week in Istanbul. Russian negotiator Vladimir Medinsky called on Kiev to accept the remains of 6,000 soldiers. Kiev denied the claims, with the Ukrainian Coordination Committee saying no date was set for the returns and accusing Russia of failing to meet agreed exchange terms. The committee also accused Moscow of playing dirty games.
We prepared more than 6,000 bodies of servicemen of the armed forces of Ukraine. Now they are in their refrigerated containers and in special wagons. They are in uniforms of the armed forces of Ukraine. Many of them are with documents. They are prepared for the transfer to the Ukrainian side. Also, we prepared a list of wounded and seriously ill prisoners of war and prisoners of war under the age of 25. In total, it is about 1,200 POs from each side, and without delay, we are ready to transfer them to the Ukrainian side.
Moving on to other news stories, Sudan's foreign ministry has accused the Rapid Support Forces of looting UN humanitarian aid meant for North Darfur. The ministry said the aid convoy was first bombed and burned in El Kuma area before being looted. The World Food Programme condemned the attack, which killed at least 5 aid workers, and called for a thorough investigation to hold those responsible accountable. Meanwhile, the crisis in Sudan is deepening. Alongside war and famine, a rapidly spreading cholera epidemic is overwhelming the region. Health officials report more than 1,000 confirmed cases every day, threatening to overwhelm fragile medical services and worsen the suffering of millions already caught in the conflict. The details with Yassine Rikti now.
Sudan is battling a deadly cholera outbreak, worsened by over 2 years of relentless war. Once thought to be under control, the disease is now surging, particularly in Khartoum and other major cities, with health officials reporting more than 1,000 new cases every day.
These days, the cholera situation is really bad, especially in Khartoum, which became at the moment the epicenter of the outbreak. So we had a wave of cholera that really increased in a few days, exploded in hundreds of cases, even getting above 1,000 cases a day in Khartoum.
Cholera is a serious illness that causes severe diarrhea. It spreads through dirty water or food contaminated by a bacteria called Vibrio cholera. Access to clean water is now a luxury in much of the country. As sanitation systems crumble, millions are forced to rely on unsafe sources, creating the perfect storm for cholera to thrive.
After 2 or 3 months of war, the water supply was interrupted. The electricity was cut off and then restored, but the water was completely cut off. It's beyond any struggle, and right now, the suffering is immense.
More than 80% of Sudan's hospitals are now shut down. Victims of conflict, looting and fuel shortages, those that remain are overwhelmed, lacking essential medicine and equipment. On the ground, humanitarian groups like Doctors Without Borders are working under immense pressure, but the scale of the crisis has outgrown their capacity. Without urgent international support, Sudan faces a catastrophic health emergency, one that could spiral beyond borders if left unchecked.
Back to the Middle East now. Iranian intelligence announced on Saturday it has obtained thousands of sensitive documents linked to nuclear facilities in the Zionist entity. Iranian media report that these materials include videos and detailed documents. Officials say the delay in publicizing the operation was to ensure the secure transfer of the files to Iran. The development adds another layer of tension to an already volatile regional situation. And in economy news, U.S. President Donald Trump announced plans to resume trade talks with China next Monday in London. Posting on Truth Social, Trump said 3 officials from his administration will meet with Chinese representatives. He expressed optimism, describing the upcoming discussions as good, and signaling a potential thaw in trade relations between the 2 economic giants. And finally, it's time to catch up on other news stories in the News in Brief, this time with Salman Asib.
China's Ministry of Commerce proposed the Green Channel to ease rare metal exports to the EU. They're imposing restrictions in response to US tariffs. The ministry said export controls are common internationally and highlighted China's readiness to fast-track approved EU orders to address their concerns and ensure smoother trade. Bangladesh Interim Prime Minister Muhammad Yunus announced that general elections will take place in the first half of April next year. In a televised message on Friday, the Nobel Peace Prize winner said more time is needed to reform institutions. He added that the government has done its best to create a favorable environment and stressed that ensuring transparent and wildly inclusive elections is a top priority to prevent the country from entering a new crisis. The Thai army announced on Saturday it will control border checkpoints with Cambodia amid rising tensions. The Thai statement said Cambodia has strengthened its military presence along the border. The 2 governments had agreed to continue talks after a brief clash last month in an unmarked border area that killed a Cambodian soldier. On Friday, over 1.6 million pilgrims began the stoning ritual at Mina in Mecca. A large number of pilgrims continued arriving on Saturday to perform the ritual on the first day of Tashriq.
And that's the end of our news for tonight. For more updates, you can always visit our social media platforms as well as our website. On behalf of all 24 News team, thank you for tuning in, and until next time, take care.